Hi, good morning.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we hear you perfectly.
We can.
Okay. All right, guys, ask me the questions. I saw a lot of them. You did a good job, very good job at producing those questions.
Thank you. Oh, so what we all are interested, first of all, is, what first led you to consider this idea that you have that cancer is a metabolic disease instead?
Well, don't forget, Otto Warburg said that a long time ago. You know who Otto Warburg was, right?
Yes, from the Warburg effect.
Well, the Warburg effect, if you saw our new paper, it creates more confusion than understanding. The Warburg effect is a multiple of phenomena in one term. People think many people think oxphos is normal in cancer cells, and that the cancer cells simply choose to ferment to allow them to grow rapidly. And they call the aerobic glycolysis, which is the uh, continual use of the Embden-Meyerhof PARS pathway, um, uh, to be necessary for driving dysregulated cell growth. Um, and the term was produced by Ephraim Racker back in the 1970s, I believe. Um, and has led to a lot of confusion. We prefer to use the term increased cytosolic substrate level phosphorylation to be more accurate biochemically. It's a substrate level phosphorylation in the cytoplasm. Most of our cells, even erythrocytes, you do that same pathway, aerobic glycolysis, if you will. But in cancer cells, it's upregulated, and it's upregulated in cancer cells because oxidative phosphorylation, is insufficient to maintain viability. So the cell, in order to remain viable, must increase an alternative form of energy called substrate level phosphorylation, which can happen both in the cytoplasm and in the mitochondria itself. So you have only two forms of energy that we know of, and that's called oxidative phosphorylation, linked to the consumption of oxygen, pulling electrons through the proteins of the electron transport chain, linked to a proton motive gradient to generate energy, highly efficient energy, because of the complete combustion of fuel materials. The other form of energy is substrate level phosphorylation, where phosphate groups are moved from an organic molecule onto ADP to form ATP. These actions can occur independently of oxygen. So you have an oxygen dependent energy and you have an oxygen independent energy. And together they both are participatory in normal energy metabolism of cells. But in cancer, the energy from substrate level phosphorylation becomes necessary to compensate for inefficient oxidative phosphorylation, and that's what defines that's the definition that's distinguishing normal cell from cancer cell. The normal cell is predominantly using energy from oxidative phosphorylation with minimal substrate level phosphorylation, substrate level phosphorylation with minimal oxidative phosphorylation. Is that clear?
Yes, yes, very clear. And I wanted to get into your ketogenic therapy. Now, I read your paper and it suggests that the ketogenic diet reduces glucose and elevating ketone bodies, and this deprives the tumor cells of energy and the glucose carbons needed for the synthesis of growth. But I wanted to ask, does the source of the ketones have a difference? Like, do you see a difference depending on one ketone from the next? Does this affect tumor behavior?
Well, that's a good point. Here's the Most of our ketone, the natural form of ketones, comes from adipocytes in our body. So you have to look at it's D beta hydroxybutyrate is the predominant ketone. And if you stop eating for a long period of time, like several days, uh, um, the hormone glucagon turns on and moves triglycerides out of stored fat cells. And triglycerides go to the liver, and the liver uses mostly saturated fatty acids to produce ketone bodies in the liver naturally. Now, if you want to try to take exogenous fat, the preferable fat is medium chain triglycerides, which occur in animal protein, the fat from animal protein. But you can also generate ketones because if you eat the fat goes into your body and the liver, if you are hungry, if your body can convert it. If you have too much glucose, you will never burn ketones. Um, because you have to realize in order to burn ketones, you have to have low insulin and elevated glucagon. It's very high. Correction. It's very hard to do that when you're taking in carbohydrates because if you take in carbohydrates, insulin is elevated. And when insulin is elevated, glucagon is reduced. So, in order to burn ketones, you have to lower insulin and you have to elevate glucagon so that you can burn ketones in the liver. So, you have to be calorie restricted to maximally get energy from fats consumed. So, what you want to do is you want to make sure your blood sugar is low and you need to take fat from the outside, from food items, and medium chain triglycerides. The origin can be an animal fat. That will also supplement the fat being mobilized from adipose cells in the body. So I think it's easier to do ketogenic diets on calorie restricted animal protein fat than on um, uh, plant fatty acids. Oftentimes, the plants have also some carbohydrates that can interfere with the process, but it's possible if you're a vegetarian, get down in these zones.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And I also wanted to ask about, you've mentioned that the goal is to achieve this sort of mass extinction of cancer cells, but like there's also been discussion of long-term management through this metabolitic therapy. So does the ketogenic diet cause the cancer cells to die off, or do they stay in sort of like a dormant state and you have to maintain it?
They do both. It does both. So the best example of that is our patient Pablo Kelly. We published a paper on him, the guy who lived with a glioblastoma for 10 years. Um, his tumor was never cured. It was there. He had to have it surgically removed every 3 years, but it never killed him. The tumor always was there. So it maintained low growth. It made an angry tumor less angry. It grew much slower, but he was never cured. He never did any drug therapy, chemo, radiation. He didn't do anything. But the diet alone was able to maintain his life. Um, but should never be considered a cure. We don't know. We cured a dog one time with ketogenic metabolic therapy without drugs, just the diet, a dog. And we published that paper. Um, right now, we have a bunch of Greek people who I don't want to call them cured, but they're living far longer. We don't know. I would say consider ketogenic metabolic therapy as a management for cancer. Um, whether it cures you or not, we don't know. All we know is that you can live far, far longer and survive longer with a higher quality of life if you do metabolic therapy. And maybe metabolic therapy with some parts of standard of care might even be good. um, but not for brain cancer. We think that the human brain should never be irradiated. Uh, we think we can get better results without irradiating the human brain with metabolic therapy. But I can't say that for pancreatic cancer or colon cancer. Um, all we know is that the ketogenic metabolic therapy can kill tumor cells and 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 maintain low indolent growth of the cells that are not killed. So you end up with a manageable situation, which may be now vulnerable to other therapies to potentially lead to a cure. But I can't say right now whether ketogenic metabolic therapy can be considered a cure for cancer. I can confidently say it's a good management for cancer, better than anything available in the world today. But I don't ever want to say that we can cure cancer with ketogenic metabolic therapy. So the patient must make the decision for themselves. Do they want, because the standard of care oftentimes doesn't cure you either. With radiation and chemo, there's no guarantee that you're going to get a cure from those therapies. One of the things you must recognize is that many people who do end up having their cancer managed with standards of care, radiation, chemo, and surgery, oftentimes will suffer great injury and new pathology as the result of being exposed to toxic poisons and radiation. Ketogenic metabolic therapy will not harm normal cells of the body like standard of care will. So you have to recognize that. Um, and that will leave that up to the patients to make a decision. But they should be informed. All patients should be given the choice of either ketogenic metabolic therapy, standard of care, or some maybe combination of these. But never told that the standard of care is the only way you can be treated. That is incorrect.
Thank you. You knocked out two questions in one answer, in one response.
Um, Talking about the metabolic management of cancer, I've been wondering, is there any type of cancer that can adapt? What do I mean? If we deprive them of the glucose and the glutamine, can they evolve in a type of way to even thrive out of the ketone body as a source of energy?
Only if they have new mitochondria that are healthy. Um,
Mm,
but every major cancer that we know of has have abnormalities in number, structure, and function of mitochondria. We cannot ferment fatty acids or ketone bodies. They're non-fermentable fuels. Cancer cell is driven by fermentation metabolism using substrate level phosphorylation. Ketones and fatty acids do not provide fuel for fermentation. There is no other amino acid that we have found that can replace glutamine. Uh, you have to realize, in order to, when a cancer cell loses its ability to obtain energy from oxidative phosphorylation,
mhm,
the replacements, glucose and glutamine, are both abundant in the microenvironment to serve as a replacement for oxidative phosphorylation. Well, ketones and fatty acids cannot be burned, cannot replace those fuels. But if you were to look at another, say, what other fuel in the body could potentially replace glucose and glutamine, the answer is we didn't find any. So we tested all 20 amino acids at at a high concentration, and none of them were as effective as glutamine. One of the interesting things about glutamine is that it's pure energy. When you go from glutamine to glutamate to alpha ketoglutarate, no energy is needed to configure this pathway. Every other amino acid must have energy used to bring it to alpha ketoglutarate. Glutamine is the only amino acid that can get to alpha ketoglutarate without the investment of energy. Number one. Number two, no other amino acid in the body is present in sufficient quantity to replace glutamine. Glutamine to get energy through substrate level phosphorylation in the mitochondria. And number two, there's simply not enough of the other amino acids to replace glutamine. So, so, um, so really, the cancer cell is checkmated by the fact that it has to have glucose and glutamine in sufficient quantity. And if you reduce both of those fuels at the same time, and then transition the body to ketones, which the tumor cells can't use, where all the other cells in the body can switch from glucose to ketones, then the tumor cells become marginalized. They can't survive. Now, the glutamine targeting has to be done a little bit more carefully because we have drugs that will target glutamine, but they also target our immune system, and we need the immune system to pick up the dead cancer cells, the corpses from the dead cancer cell, and they need the glutamine as well. Normal cells in the immune system need glutamine. So you can't be too aggressive in targeting. As a physician, you must understand the press pulse therapeutic strategy. It is easy to press glucose down, but you cannot press glutamine down. Otherwise, you will harm the body, the gut, and you will harm the immune system. So you have to know how to strategically use glutamine targeting together with glucose restriction in order to manage the cancer and reduce the growth. And then you combine that with exercise. Exercise will suck the glucose out of the bloodstream and also will lower glutamine. So you need to exercise at the same time you do these metabolic therapies, absolutely essential for the survival of the patient. So all of these things come together at the same time to achieve a new level of metabolic homeostasis, facilitating normal health of cells, but putting tremendous metabolic pressure on the surviving tumor cells.
Thank you. That brings me to my next question, because when we talk about ketosis, right,
Mhm.
you mentioned that a safe and reliable way would be the water fasting method.
Mm.
However, I wanted to ask, how can we, let's say, for example, we have a patient with cancer and diabetes. Would it be safe for them to adopt that water fasting? And if not, how should we proceed?
Yeah, well, usually we talk about type 2 diabetes, not
Yes.
type 1 diabetes. It's usually type 2 diabetes. And we don't go water fasting at the beginning of this treatment. What we do to the person with diabetes and cancer, suppose we have a person who has both type 2 diabetes and cancer, which is common, not uncommon, let's put it that way. We take that individual and we give them a diet with zero, very, very low carbohydrates. You can have, salmon, fish, or meat, or something like this, and we monitor their glucose ketone index, which is the ratio of glucose to ketones in the bloodstream. And the diabetic patient, now, in contrast to cancer, diabetes can be cured by ketogenic metabolic therapy. You can cure diabetes. So what we need to do to that patient is we need to bring the blood sugar down and the ketones higher, but not with water only fasting, with diet. After about 14 days of doing this, then we can do a little bit of water only fasting, but not at the beginning. The patient must adapt and accommodate this new physiological change. So it's very, very hard to do water only fasting when you're a diabetic. I mean, your blood sugar is in insulin, all this. So you have to gradually reduce a gradient, maybe 1, 2 weeks maybe 3 weeks sometimes, depending on the individual. And then the body starts to recover. And then once the body starts to recover, becomes more metabolically homeostatic, you can do water only fasting and then come in with target the glutamine. And we use M-benders, these parasite medications will kill tumor cells without harming normal cells. So we can get rid of the diabetes and reduce the risk of cancer and reduce the simultaneous both of those, because both of them are due to abnormal metabolic homeostasis. And ketogenic metabolic therapy brings the body back into a state of metabolic homeostasis. So we correct the diabetes, we correct the high blood pressure, the hypertension. At the same time, we are killing tumor cells. So this is an ideal therapeutic strategy. Unbelievable.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay, so the ketogenic metabolic therapy aims to basically manage most forms of cancer, correct?
Yes.
So, um, is there any specific type of variations to this therapy to then manage specific types of cancer?
Well, we would have to, the only cancer that would not respond to ketogenic metabolic therapy would be a cancer that would have normal mitochondrial function. And we have never found any cancer with normal mitochondrial function. Every major cancer, and the big paper we just published, representing 98% of all major cancers, all of them have defects in the number, structure, and function of mitochondria. So we don't think there is any cancer, at least right now, that can survive and do well under ketogenic metabolic therapy.
So, since most cancers don't or react very well broadly to this metabolic therapy, that basically makes you think that you don't have to do biopsies to then, well, like pinpoint down specific cancers for your therapy.
Yeah, well, you can identify cancer by uh, MRI, PET scan, CAT scan, thermoregulation. There's a lot of ways you can determine whether you have an abnormal growth or something like this. What is the purpose of doing a biopsy? It tells the pathologist that, oh, you have dysregulated cell growth, uh, uh, and you look at it under the microscope, and the pathologist will tell you that the cells appear to be benign, transformative, or malignant. One of those three outcomes will come from pathology report, from biopsy. So the important issue here is that if the cancer is benign, you have disturbed the microenvironment by taking a piece of tissue from that lesion. You have now created a wound. A wound could provoke a benign tumor from becoming malignant. If the cancer is malignant, you have now made it much worse by creating an environment that's even more inflamed than what was there originally, putting the patient at risk for spreading the tumor around the body. So, why would anyone want to do biopsy just so you can have a pathological observation? Why don't you assume that every lesion that anybody would show, assume that it is highly malignant? Just assume that. And then just do metabolic therapy. And what happens in many cases, the lesion becomes much, much smaller, much, much more circumscribed, and sometimes disappears. So, why would we need to do biopsy? And then, of course, if the metabolic therapy makes something big much smaller, but it doesn't go away completely, then the surgeon should go in and completely remove the lesion, never doing biopsy. So you have a lot of options rather than stabbing somebody's lesion, running the risk of making that lesion worse and spreading the tumor cells around the body.
Thank you, doctor. So another complication of cancer patients is, well, desnutrition. So the incidence is estimated to be between 40 to 80% that all cancer patients are going to have to deal with some type of desnutrition. So how does a ketogenic diet or press-post therapy respond to this common complication?
Well, I don't know what you mean by nutrition. Yeah, I
Desnutrition.
know, but when you say they have bad, are these people who eat bad food all the time, highly processed carbohydrates, or what are they doing?
No, it's basically having to do with the nutrients that you get from keto diet. So this
Oh.
high fat, how
Okay,
maintainable
so
is it?
why don't we look, and then you tell me, the diet we used to manage glioblastoma in our Greek patients, their diet consisted of sardines, salmon, avocado, olive oil, small amount of melon, eggs, all restricted in amount. Where is the nutritional imbalance in that diet? None, right? Okay, there you go. Here's
Yes,
your answer.
none.
Right?
And yes, so in this type of diets, we can also not expect muscle loss.
Well, I mean, you can manage. I mean, okay, if someone can't eat fish, they might want to eat lamb, a small amount of lamb, or steak, beef, or pork. You can replace the fish with pork or lamb or beef. As long as you have a nutritious a balance, everything is balanced. So, and then of course, you use the glucose ketone index calculator measured by keto mojo meter to know whether the diet you're having is able to uh, lower glucose and elevate ketones, but at the same time, providing all of the nutritional value that you would get in any diet. So the only thing that these diets do not contain is high carbohydrates and highly processed foods. High processed foods are not part of the ketogenic metabolic therapy, but all natural foods in low quantities to maintain low glucose ketone index are all acceptable for managing cancer. And you may have to use it by difference in age of the patient, gender of the patient, religious background of the patient, and culture of the patient. So these metabolic therapies will be streamlined based on age, gender, religion, and culture, so that a nutritional dietitian for ketogenic metabolic therapy will be able to have a variety of approaches, all based on the ratio, on the glucose ketone index ratio, to allow that patient to know they're in therapeutic ketosis. And one patient may do it with a plant-based diet, another patient with a fish-based diet, another with a Mediterranean diet, another with a meat carnivore diet. So it's all going to know, the knowledge of the nutritional dietitian will be very important for knowing how to do this.
Perfect. Thank you, doctor.
Okay, so um, would you say that genes have a primary or secondary role in the development of cancer?
Well, let's look at the evidence. There are some cancers that have no genetic mutations. Okay, they have been not many, but they're reported in the scientific literature. Some cancers, some normal tissues, like in your body or my body or Diego's body or Leanne's body, we find that in normal cells, we have mutations in driver genes, but yet none of us have cancer. So, if we have driver gene mutation in normal cells that are not cancerous, how important could the driver gene be? And then we have the nuclear mitochondrial transfer experiments, which show that if you take the nucleus of a tumor cell containing tumor suppressor gene mutations and oncogene dysregulation and put that cell nucleus into a a non-cancer cytoplasm and you get regulated growth, how important can the mutations be? And then if people have taken the nucleus of a normal cell with no mutations and put it into the cytoplasm of a tumor cell, and you get dysregulated cell growth. What's going on? So all of the evidence tells us that gene mutations are not a driver of cancer. Also, if you look at inherited risk factors like Li-Fraumeni P53 inherited mutation,
Exactly. I was gonna ask
BRCA1,
about.
BRCA1, breast cancer, retinoblastoma, every one of those mutations damages the number and structure of mitochondria in some way. So clearly, all of the genetic, if we have inherited risk factors, they damage mitochondria, and all of the provocative agents that cause cancer damage mitochondria, meaning that if genes are there, there's secondary risk factors, not primary risk factors. You should also know that when oxidative phosphorylation is interrupted, you must transition to fermentation. Oncogenes turn on and open the floodgates, the transporters to bring in fermentation fuels. And when the oxidative phosphorylation returns to normal, the oncogenes turn off. So clearly, the oncogenes are facilitators, not the cause of cancer. They facilitate the transition from one state to the other. So clearly, when you look at all that together, all of the genes are generally downstream epiphenomena from the damage to the mitochondria. That cancer is not a genetic disease, it's a mitochondrial metabolic disease.
But don't you think that, like, even now, there's enough evidence for people to drop the somatic mutation theory and to pick up the metabolic? There's, like, I feel that there is enough for people to accept it. It's just a matter of getting the information to them.
Yeah, well, then becomes your job. Your job has to identify them, and you guys have, and you're going to be treated poorly sometimes. You will be told that you don't know anything because you're young, and you have to be able to know the data and the information to support your position, because the evidence against the somatic mutation theory is so overwhelming. There's no way a logical mind could think you have to be embarrassed to say that cancer is a genetic disease because the evidence is so strong against it. So if it's not a genetic disease, what is it? It's a mitochondrial metabolic disease. And the evidence shows that if you use ketogenic metabolic therapy, you can improve the health not only of cancer patients, but of diabetic patients, high blood pressure patients, people with dementia. This is a revolution that's coming in medicine and chronic diseases. We are working all these cancer, all this stuff of chronic disease. Our ancestors during Paleolithic period had very little, very rare chronic disease. 500,000 years ago, our members of our species died because of injuries and infections, not chronic disease, not cancer, not diabetes, not dementia. They died early because they didn't have antibiotics. They didn't have orthopedic surgery. So they didn't have the things that we have today that can allow people to live much longer. But they did not have cancer, and they did not have type 2 diabetes, and they did not have a lot of the diseases that we have today, which are all linked to inflammation. These are chronic diseases because of diet and lifestyle issues. Our people today don't exercise as much. They eat bad foods. They have a lot of emotional stress. They have poor sleep, intermittent hypoxia. All of these together create chronic disease, cancer being the number one. So we now know how to manage this, and we're developing tools and knowledge to manage these different chronic diseases. So this is the future, and it is coming, and you guys are necessary to pass this word and look at the data, because a lot of these other people are not looking at the data or hearing the information. That makes sense to you?
Yes, a lot of sense. Thank you. Well, Dr. Sifu, I want to thank you so much for joining our call. You have answered pretty much every single one of our questions. And I also shared with my teammates the other documents that you sent me. I found it very interesting, the one with the amino acids, where you tested it. And I was
Hmm.
wondering if you could explain before we end off just a little bit about the sulfur-containing amino acids, how they differentiated from the others.
Yeah, very exciting. We don't know. Um, we were not expecting to see that, but it was very clear that sulfur-containing amino acids were inhibitory towards oxidative, towards fermentation. And the answer is we don't know because some people say, oh, you must have methionine. You must have no methionine in your diet because methionine is a sulfur-containing amino acid. I don't know. I don't know. That doesn't make any sense in light of what we found. So we just as you saw, we were very cautious in how we touched upon the sulfur-containing amino acids because it was kind of surprising. And a couple of the reviewers of the paper also noted that very well. They also said that. What is this methionine? How come you found this? I don't know. We just found it. And we repeated it over and over again. It was real. So maybe that's something you guys can do. Maybe you guys can figure out what's going on with the sulfur-containing amino acids. We don't know that. So that's a very I'm very happy you were able to see that because the reviewers of the paper also saw that. And I don't know what to say. These are the data. We have to just look more into this.
Once again, thank you so much. And we really appreciate this opportunity for you to speak with us. Everything has been so straightforward, so clear, and we appreciate everything. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. And I hope you guys have a nice day now. Okay.
Bye bye, doctor. Thank you very
You as
much.
well. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Bye now.